Welcome to the eShopperReviews podcast, episode 31. This is the podcast for October 2023. I'm Jenn Ip.
And I'm Jake McNeil.
For those new to this podcast, eShopperReviews was previously a subreddit on reddit.com where Jake reviewed games on Nintendo platforms with over 2,300 reviews. However, we are currently in transition to a new home, and in the meantime, you can find all of our new reviews on our Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/eShopperReviews. And on that note, all of our content is supported by the kind donations of our Patreon patrons. This month's sponsors are Ben, Andy Miller, Xlane, Homer Simpin, Johannes, Talisa, Francis Ops, Gabriel Coronado Medina, Eliezerev, Jared Wark, Christopher Wolf, and Seth Questionfeld. Thank you all for helping to keep the reviews coming. Now on to the patron-voted games. The standard vote had 3 games this month. We have Homebody, Patrick's Parabox, and a tie between Venice 2089, A Castle Full of Cats, A Tale for Anna, Railway Islands Puzzle, Startup Company Console Edition, and Unidentified Falling Objects.
Okay, before going on, a few bits of housekeeping here. I wanted to comment on a moment ago, you were talking about how we're in transition to our new home. I wanted you to know that's not just something we're saying. We are actively working on that. I made actually significant progress on that just this morning. It's still going to take some time, but know that we will be reporting on this. My hope is that we will be in our new home before the end of the year. I can't commit to that because I don't know for sure how long this is going to take, but we are steadily on progress to reach that goal. The other thing, talking about the patron-voted games, last month we did something a little special. For our standard patron vote, where we actually had 3 votes to select 3 games, and each vote was going to be for a different group of patrons. One was going to be for anyone who donated $5 or more. One was going to be for anyone who donated $1 or more, including the $5 group. And one was going to be for everyone, regardless of if they donated or not, including the 2 previous groups. And so all of this is kind of added up together into these finalists. And in the end, we had 2 very clear winners and a whole bunch of, well, these ones got a decent number of votes, but they're all kind of tied up. So normally I act as the tiebreaker for these, and I will be reviewing those first 2 games and at least one of the others at some point in the month of October. I should mention this is a vote that is still in progress as we're recording this, so it's entirely possible that another game might pull ahead, but as we're recording this, Homebody has a pretty steady lead, and Patrick's Parabox has got a pretty good number too, so I feel like it's just down to that 3rd game, and it's probably going to be one of those games that I just mentioned, but we'll see if one of them pulls ahead at the last minute.
Our all-patron budget vote is also Meta Dude.
So that one, we have a clear winner, at least as of this recording. Again, it could change between now and the end of the month, but yeah. And I should note that most of these games in this month's votes, I don't really know a heck of a lot about. Patrick's Parabox, I know a tiny little bit about. I know that it was made by the Draknek developer, who they make some very good puzzle games. So I don't know much about this specific game. I just know that developer has made a lot of quality stuff. So the fact that that's one of the leaders as far as the games that are winning in these votes, I'm really looking forward to seeing that. But I'm curious to see how all the other games shake out as well.
All right, so next month's vote, which is the major games for October and November, they include Batman Arkham Trilogy, Borderlands 3 Ultimate Edition, Disgaea 7 Vows of the Virtueless, Fashion Dreamer, Metal Gear Solid Master Collection Volume 1, Sonic Superstars, Star Ocean The Second Story R, Super Mario RPG, and WarriorWare Move It.
So October and November this year is pretty stacked, and I felt like these games were probably the most prominent, the biggest name games coming out in the next few months, save for one, which, if you've been paying attention to upcoming releases, you'll probably notice its conspicuous absence. And that's one that I feel like it's such a major game that I kind of have to review it, so it wouldn't be fair to include it in the vote. But for the rest, it's all there, and I look forward to seeing what games you guys think are most deserving of getting played. Whichever one ends up getting the most votes will get reviewed sometime in the month of November.
So the all-patron budget game vote include Boomshine Plus, Bounce House, Bust Up, Flup the Fish, Golf Hole-in-One, Item Tower, Kumakichi's Birth, Destruction God, Leartanium OS Operating System.
All of these are games that I don't know a thing about. They're just new games that cost $2 or under that have come out sometime in 2023. So whichever one of these sounds most interesting to you, I will review sometime in the month of November when it gets the most votes.
All right, so let's talk about some of the games that eShopperReviews covered in the month of September 2023. Just to note, these are not necessarily games released in the last month, but games reviewed that month. And we'll start by talking about the hidden gems, which happens to be the biggest category this month.
Yeah, I had a lot of hidden gems this month.
So let's start with, this looks cute. Let's start with Kittens and Yarn.
Kittens and Yarn is cute. And more than cute, I would say this is a very soothing, very relaxing game. It has a very calming soundtrack. The puzzle-based gameplay is very simple and straightforward, but it's actually a really good puzzle. The idea is you have a bunch of hexagon tiles that all have this tangle of yarn on them, and you are trying to rearrange the tiles so that the yarn all follows a consecutive path and makes sense. You know, there are multiple colors of yarn. You want to make sure that each yarn color has its path, all flowing properly. At its core, this is basically just a tile swapping puzzle, which that's nothing new. But having, the whole yarn thing going on, having the really good presentation, and on top of that, it's only $3. So I feel like this is definitely a game where if you're looking for a super inexpensive puzzle game to add to your Nintendo Switch, and especially if you want something that's going to be really relaxing, this one's a no-brainer.
Maggie the Magnet.
Maggie the Magnet really surprised me. I wasn't really expecting much from it. This is a puzzle platformer type of game. Maggie the Magnet is a game where you really only have one input into the game, and that is when you press the button, the magnet turns on. When you release it, the magnet turns off. And using that, and based on all of the different magnetized elements within a level, you have to get your character from one part of a level to another while collecting bits in it. And I thought it was a really original and fun take on the genre. I like the way that it simplifies things, but that the way that it simplifies it adds a challenge. Because it's like, if you just want to move your character a little bit to the left, you don't have that kind of control. Instead, you have to time your button press so that you fling yourself over to the right far enough that when you fling yourself back, you move over to the left instead. I thought it was really clever, really well made, really good level design. And again, this is a very cheap game. This is only $5. And for that price, again, really well worth it.
Get Packed, Couch Chaos.
This is one of a few games that I reviewed this month that's a really good kind of party game. It's far from the first game that the general premise is that you are moving objects from a house to a moving truck. But this game, I feel like one thing that it does that really sets it apart is that it has a really great competitive mode where each of you are competing to move the most valuables into the moving truck as possible. And while a lot of these games offer co-op, and the co-op in this game is very good, I feel like it's the competitive mode that really pushes this above and beyond and makes it something special. On the other side of things, I wish that this game had more content. I feel like that's one of its bigger flaws. I wish that there were more locations, but With what's here, I still think it's a fun time and definitely worthy of a spot in your party game rotation.
Please touch the artwork.
Well, if you insist.
Oh, yes, I do.
This is another puzzle game. A lot of good puzzle games this month, I guess. This one, the basic premise is that it's copying this specific art style, distil or something like that. I'm totally mispronouncing it, I'm sure. But it's this very abstract and simplified art style involving just lines and squares and stuff like that. And this game uses that art style to create 3 different distinct types of puzzle. Even beyond that, it acts as kind of an introduction or tour of this style of art. And again, I think this is a pretty user-friendly game, pretty good for puzzle game fans, and visually it looks very nice. So yeah, just an all-around good puzzle game. Puzzle game fans, I reviewed a lot of stuff that you should definitely look at this month.
Rubber Bandits.
I suppose if really good puzzle games is one of the things that I reviewed a lot of this month, another thing I reviewed a lot of was good party games, like good games to get a bunch of multiplayer action in. And Rubber Bandits is another one of those. This one, the premise is that you're all in these enclosed spaces trying to steal a bunch of money and bring it back to the entrance. Although there are a whole lot of variables, there are different ways to play. It has a very loose kind of control to it that I feel like it can be a bit annoying, but also the fact that everyone is subject to this loose control means that you're all on a level playing ground, and it kind of adds a bit of silliness to the action that I think works out for the best. So again, great party game, definitely a one well worth trying out.
Trombone Champ.
Trombone Champ actually came out this month. It was a game that was shadow dropped during this month's Nintendo Direct, which we'll talk about a bit later. This is a music rhythm game that is pretty unique within the genre because it is not about making really great music. In fact, it's about making terrible music that is as close to being decent as possible, which is not very easy because the controls are pretty loose and difficult to get perfection in, but that's also kind of the point and kind of why I appreciate this. It's very silly, it's very fun, it's very funny, and this is another great party game where I can just imagine getting a room full of people, getting 4 people playing this game and all of you tooting and making horrible honking noises that only barely resemble the song you're trying to play. To me, that sounds like a great time.
I highly suggest using the motion controls for this game because when I tried it out, my fingers were starting to hurt from how much I was pressing the buttons.
Yeah, they offer multiple control types in this, including this is one of the very few games on Nintendo Switch that makes use of the infrared camera on the right Joy-Con. Most people don't even realize that camera is there, and that's in part because very few games actually use it. This one uses it, but I still think the motion controls are better.
Escape Lala Retro Point and Click Adventure.
I want to say I think this was one of the patron-voted games for the prior month, and I'm glad it was. This is, as the whole point-and-click adventure thing indicates, this is a graphic adventure game, and it's a pretty simple one. It's one that you could probably be finished with within the span of a half hour or so. But, I mean, it's $1, so it's not like it's going to be that big of a problem that it's short. And for the time that it lasts, I think that the presentation is kind of nice and retro styled, as the title indicates. The puzzles are good. The hint system is good. Honestly, my biggest problem with this game is I kind of wish that it was a bigger and more expensive game because I would have liked to have played a longer version of this. It's pretty darn good.
So we have 2 games for the noteworthy reviews. The first one is F-Zero 99.
Just a moment ago, I was talking about how Trombone Champ was shadow dropped. This was another game that was shadow dropped during the Direct. This is the first F-Zero game that we've had, I want to say in like 15 years or so. The last one was on the Game Boy Advance, just to give you an idea how long it was. And that one wasn't even released in the United States. F-Zero 99 is not, I think, what a lot of F-Zero fans wanted in an F-Zero sequel. A lot of people were wanting something more like the GameCube game F-Zero GX, which was, I think, even by today's standards, graphically really impressive. Very fast-paced, super cool looking, slick. This is not that. F-Zero 99 is designed to look like the Super Nintendo game in the series, the original F-Zero. And it has a higher frame rate, it has higher resolution. It's definitely not using the same engine as the original, but it's designed to look like it. And of course, the big difference is, as the title indicates, this is a online game where you are racing against 98 other players. It's really hectic. It's really, really just frenetic, but it's still a ton of fun. And if you have a Nintendo Switch Online account, then this is not going to cost you a single penny more than what you're already paying. So you might as well download it and give it a try. And even though the hectic and frenetic nature of this means that it's not going to be for everyone, I think it's fairly fun and unique and still worth a try despite this.
WrestleQuest, which was a patron-voted game.
I like the idea of WrestleQuest. I like the idea of having a pro wrestling turn-based RPG. It's just a very silly idea. I think this game kind of approaches it with some good ideas. But the problem is that you're not playing as one of the named pro wrestlers, but you also can't create your own character, which I feel like I would have wanted to do one of those two things. If I am, being a character in this universe of toys based on real life pro wrestlers, hey, it would be nice if I was actually playing as Jake the Snake or Macho Man Randy Savage.
Oh, God.
But you're not playing as those. You can't create your own character. Instead, you're playing kind of a character who's a parody of Randy Savage, but Randy Savage exists in this universe, so it's like I'm like getting the worst of both worlds here. And that in and of itself is one thing, but then it's like a lot of the characters in this game do not feel unique. Your character's big thing is that he wants to be the best pro wrestler in the world. And it's like, okay, but there's got to be more to you than that. Oh, and he's got a Hispanic theme to him. He's like the Hispanic version of Randy Savage.
Oh, God.
Which, that's cute and amusing, but I need more to your personality than that, and I'm not really getting it. In an RPG genre, you really need to have that character nailed down. There's some other things, like I feel like the combat in the game leaves something to be desired. There are pacing issues. In the end, I still think this is a decent game. It's just, I feel like it could have been done much better.
So we only have one game in the worst games category, which is Harem Girl Isabella.
Ah, boy. So
It's another puzzle game, too.
Another puzzle game, and I seem to have done a lot of these lately, which is the ecchi games or the hentai games, whatever you want to call them, kind of porny stuff. And again, I try not to judge these, and maybe I need to stay away from them for a little while because I don't want it to just be ragging on these games every month. But hey, wouldn't you know it, a lot of these games are not very good. Go figure. And with this one, it's another one of those games where it's just a tile swapping puzzle, and it's not a particularly good one. I talked about earlier how you do a really good tile swapping puzzle. You have good presentation, you have some unique gameplay elements, and you get a game like Kittens and Yarn that was really good. This one is just, hey, well, maybe we'll have some bare-chested women, and that'll save us the trouble of having decent gameplay. No. Again, if that's all you're interested in, you have a whole internet of possibilities at your fingertips. Go for that. Don't waste your time or money on this game.
On to the best games.
Yes,
and
please.
We'll start with Let's Build a Zoo.
Let's Build a Zoo is a management simulation where, surprise, surprise, you are building a zoo. As this genre goes, I don't know that I would say that this does anything that truly breaks the mold, but it does have some really good ideas. For example, you can genetically create your own unique creatures. It has a morality system where you can keep your creatures in squalor and just maximize profit.
Oh.
Or you can be aiming to be better and try to make an ethically run prison for animals.
Oh, God.
I kid. An ethically run zoo. Come on. Zoos are not necessarily prison for animals. They can be designed for preservation purposes.
They can.
And they actually have those elements in this game where you can keep an animal that's endangered and then release it into the wild to try and increase its population. And that's really cool. And the thing is, these are not just surface level elements. These actually have an impact on the gameplay where some of the upgrades you can get are really dependent on which ethical path you're taking. For example, if you want access to environmental options for renewable energy, you need to be taking the ethical path. On the other hand, if you want to be creating a meat packing plant that's processing out the animals when you're done with them.
That's so sad.
That's down the unethical path, obviously.
That's so horrible.
But both opportunities exist here, and I have to give this game credit for trying something a bit different. In the end, the actual core gameplay is going to be pretty familiar to you if you're a fan of this genre, and it does it very well on Nintendo Switch. So I would say overall, this is one of my favorite management simulations on the Nintendo Switch. It's very good.
Do you want the good playthrough or the evil playthrough?
I mean, you're not restricted to one or the other. You could do both.
Okay. Moving on, we have Atelier Ryza 3, Alchemist of the End, and the Secret Key.
I have mixed feelings about Atelier Ryza 3.
Really?
I think it is quite possibly the best game in the Ryza series, which is in turn probably the best sub-series of the Atelier franchise. So this is possibly the pinnacle of the entire Atelier franchise. Having said that, I think that Atelier Ryza 3 might be the least impressive game of the Atelier Ryza series. I think the first Ryza game was really amazing. It had these incredible graphics, a great soundtrack. The second game, maybe the detail wasn't quite as great, but it raised the scope, something really impressive. And again, the soundtrack was great. Ryza 3, I think the soundtrack is decent, but it doesn't impress me as much as the other two. The scope is the biggest of the three, and maybe this is just the limitations of the Nintendo Switch hardware. I feel like it struggled the most with that hardware, and visually it just doesn't strike me as being as impressive. However, while I am not as enthusiastic about it in terms of, like I said, I didn't feel that wow factor, it's hard to deny that it's just a really good RPG. And for those who aren't familiar, the Atelier games in general are RPGs, like JRPGs, that have a focus on their crafting system. This game kind of expands out to have you exploring the lands farther out around the areas that were encompassing the earlier games. And I think it does a good job of that. There's a lot of area to explore, but I think they didn't quite implement the limitations of the Nintendo Switch so well. So you have a lot of pop-in, you have a lot of ugly textures and stuff. And where the first game in particular was super polished, this one I think is decent, but I don't know. I wonder if it might be better on another platform. I mean, surely it'll look more impressive on another platform, but I feel like maybe more than the other games in the series. I don't mean to be super negative. This is a very good JRPG, and if you're a fan of the genre, I highly recommend it. Play the first two Ryza games first.
So, the last one for the best games is Sea of Stars.
I imagine you've probably been hearing a lot about this game lately. This game just came out, and it's funny. A few months ago, I reviewed Chained Echoes, which seemed like it was designed as a spiritual like callback to Xenogears, a classic JRPG. And Sea of Stars feels like it's also a callback to a classic JRPG, in this case, Chrono Trigger. And they even brought on Yasunori Mitsuda to do a few songs on the soundtrack. He did music for the original Chrono Trigger and Xenogears, as it happens. This game also works in elements from other classic RPGs, like it has timed hits that were introduced in Super Mario RPG. I don't think this is quite as much of a classic as Chrono Trigger or Super Mario RPG were, but it's still a really good JRPG, gorgeous presentations. Like, I had my jaw drop at points in this game being like, I don't know how they did that, but I know that it had to have taken a lot more work than it probably comes across as when you're playing it. Just the lighting and shadow in this game is really something to... It's hard for me to find the words to describe it. It is really good looking, and the soundtrack's great, and some of the characters are really lovable. Honestly, I felt like the two main characters were the least interesting characters in the whole game, but everyone else is interesting at least.
All right, a bit of housekeeping. Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack for August 2023, release for Nintendo 64, includes Excite Bike 64.
So the reason why we're mentioning that this month is because this game was released onto Nintendo Switch Online after we did our last podcast last month, and I wanted to share a few thoughts on it. I think Excite Bike 64 is a good motorbike racing game, but it is far more technical than I think most Nintendo players tend to be used to in sports games on the platform. And so I think a lot of people are going to be caught off guard by this game and maybe have difficulty playing it. On top of that, the controls for this game don't really feel quite natural, like the button assignments and all of that, because it was designed around the Nintendo 64 controller. On a Nintendo Switch controller, it doesn't quite feel the same. So I think it's a good game. I think it's very dated, and I think that its target audience is going to be extremely limited and niche. If you are in that target audience, there are probably going to be better games out there for you, like the Monster Motocross games on Nintendo Switch are going to be more modern and look better and offer more options. But if you already have Nintendo Switch Online's expansion pack, if you already have the Nintendo 64 app, you might as well try it. It's there. I think only a very small sliver of people out there are really going to enjoy it, though.
Nintendo Switch Online September 2023 releases for Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and Game Boy. They include Downtown Neketsu March, Super Awesome Field Day, Joy Mech Fight, Kirby Star Stacker, and Quest for Camelot.
I feel like all four of these games are kind of bizarre choices in their own way. Downtown Neketsu March Super Awesome Field Day. What a title, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was originally released only in Japan, and this is in the Kunio-kun series, which is probably best known for the River City Girls franchise and River City Ransom. The thing that's odd about this, beyond just the title, is this was originally released on the Famicom, and we actually have already had access to this on the Nintendo Switch in the form of the Double Dragon and Kunio-kun collection, which has a newly translated and newly localized version of the game available for play. That's not the version we're getting here. The version we're getting here is completely untranslated and still in Japanese, and because there's a lot of menu elements that you really kind of want to understand, not having access to that is like we're getting an inferior version of the game, and it's not really a great game to begin with. So I'm not sure why they felt like it was important for us to play this. Joy Mech Fight is another Japanese language game. In fact, the first three games I'm going to talk about here are Japanese language only games. Joy Mech Fight is a fighting game with characters that don't have limbs. They just have, like, they're very abstract shapes, like if you played the Rayman games, you know, he has like fists but no arms, you know, that kind of thing. And one of the characters from this game even had a cameo appearance in the Smash Brothers series as one of the assist trophies. So it's kind of a very obscure Nintendo reference. I'm not sure that fighting game fans are really going to get a heck of a lot out of this. And in fact, I don't think most people will. It's kind of an interesting, so that's a thing that exists. But beyond that, I don't know that it's really bringing much to the service. Kirby Star Stacker is probably the best out of this bunch of games, but again, it's kind of an odd choice because we did get a version of this game in America. That was the version that was released on Game Boy. That's not the version we got here. We got the Super Nintendo game, which looks better and sounds better, but again, it's Japanese language only. And on balance, I think it might be the better choice, but it's still frustrating to have to try and navigate the menus without knowing Japanese. And then finally, I don't even know what was behind this. Quest for Camelot is technically a licensed game. It is based on an animated film that came out in the 90s. It wasn't a very well-liked animated film, and the game wasn't very well-liked either.
I remember the film. It wasn't that great.
When it comes to licenses, not all licenses are the same. It probably costs more to license a Disney thing than some random Warner Brothers movie that's long forgotten. Mm-hmm. Still, I think it's got to be galling to a lot of Nintendo fans that Nintendo went to the length of paying for a licensed game to be released on their service. And it's not DuckTales. It's not, one of the many classic licensed games. Like, I can think of tons of them. The original NES Batman game. Oh, that was great. Mickey's Magical Quest on Super Nintendo. That was amazing. But no, instead we got this kind of not great Game Boy Color game based on a movie nobody cares about anymore. And I don't think it's especially worth playing. I mean, it's not super bad. It's just not good in any way that makes it worth bothering with. So it's weird that they chose to add this at all.
And then Nintendo Switch Online Expansion Pack September 2023 release for Game Boy Advance includes Kirby and the Amazing Mirror.
Technically, as we are recording this game has not been released onto Nintendo Switch Online yet. So I cannot say, as of this recording, that I have played this release of the game. However, when I was doing Wii U Virtual Console reviews, this is one of the games that I reviewed for that. And so I have some very fresh memories of this game that I can talk about here. And I highly doubt that this release is going to change my opinion of it, which is this. Kirby games are always usually at least decent. It's Kirby, it's accessible, it's a platformer, it's fine. Kirby and the Amazing Mirror is a little bit like a Metroidvania in that it has kind of this interconnected world, but it almost seems like a Metroidvania designed by people who don't really understand Metroidvanias, which is weird because they've done other games that are similar to Metroidvanias that were actually really good. It's not bad, but I definitely think this wasn't one of Kirby's best games.
So let's talk about the thing that's pissed off a lot of game devs and publishers. So Unity, which is a very popular game engine that everybody from, big name studios to just people like me who are trying to pick up how to make games. Unity is a game engine that decided to change their contract, and it has pissed off a lot of people. Now, they've more or less kind of changed their stance since announcing it, so this is still developing.
Yeah, that's just it is. This almost seems like it's developing by the day, so by the time this podcast comes out, it may well have evolved even further. But the past doesn't get erased by new developments, and I feel like regardless of whatever changes or announcements that Unity decides to make at this point, they can't erase what they've already done. And what they've already done has possibly caused irreparable harm to their relationships with developers around the world, both developers on Nintendo Switch and on all platforms. This is the entire realm of video games. And just to give you an idea, tons of major and small video games make use of Unity. Pokemon Go was designed on Unity.
I'm not surprised. Unity introduced a new per-install runtime fee for games that make over $200,000 a year and have at least 200,000 downloads. These changes will go into effect on January 1st, 2024, and will retroactively affect all games made using Unity, including those previously released, for all installs starting on that date.
Now, I believe that retroactive thing is one of the things that they have more recently backtracked on, but the fact that they were trying to do that in the first place has a lot of people being like, how can we trust that you won't change on this after the media attention starts to die down?
Exactly.
And to give you an idea, the previous threshold for fees was only $100,000 a month. So in that way, it's improved. And it was a per seat fee. Per seat, meaning, let's say you have a game company with 5 developers. Each one of those developers has their own computer. Each of those computers has Unity installed on it. You'll be charged for those 5 installs. For comparison's sake, Unreal, which is another game engine that a lot of developers use, they charge a flat fee of 5% for any money made after the first $1 million on a game. So if your game doesn't make $1 million, Unreal will not see a single penny from you. One of the things that caused this to happen is that Unity was not profitable. They were not making money with their previous business model. So they needed to make a change. This was inevitable. It had to happen. And I don't think any developer would have faulted them for making a change. The problem was that they tried to make a change without giving advance notice, and that would affect projects that were already in development. Rather than saying we're releasing a new version of Unity, previous versions won't be available after this date. If you want to do this, then you will have to sign up for this new contract. People might have griped about that, but at the very least they would be like, we're not having the rug pulled out from underneath us. Another problem, and there are so many problems. Another problem is they wanted to change the fee to a per install fee. And this causes all kinds of questions. The first one being, how do they know how many people have installed a game? Because the only ways to track that would require stuff to be in games that would break international laws, because there are laws against tracking user data. So how do you track the number of installs without breaking those laws? Apparently, a lot of developers are saying, yeah, that's not possible. So either they're making up those numbers and lying about it, or they have some sort of tracking thing in their games that's not legal. Problem number 2, a lot of developers worried about retaliatory stuff. Like, what if gamers decided that they don't like the idea that there's a trans person in this game, so they want to get back at this developer? What they'll do is they'll buy a copy of the game and install it and uninstall it and install it and uninstall it and install it and uninstall it. And with each one of those, it's a new install. So they're going to be pushing that game past its limit for installs and costing them money with each new install.
And this also includes like multiple installs if maybe like your game is not working and you need to uninstall and reinstall. This also applies to free demos.
What about patches? Because often with patches, you need to reinstall the game.
Sometimes. Very rarely now, but sometimes.
What if you have the game on multiple platforms? What if you bought a Steam Deck and want to transfer your game from your PC to Steam Deck back and forth? What if you have your game on Nintendo Switch and you want to uninstall the game to save space and then later you reinstall it? The question is, how do they track this and what counts? And the thing is, when they originally made this change, they didn't really go into detail and they didn't have the answers to these questions readily available, which really is telling. It basically says that they weren't even thinking about this. They were just looking at dollar signs and not realizing the kind of impact it would have. It really undercuts the confidence in the company, even before you look at the fact that a lot of these developers are looking at this saying, we have this game that we've been working on for half a year now, and if we'd known that this change was going to be coming down the pipe, we never would have picked Unity in the first place.
Yeah, and Unity has gone back and forth between, what they are deciding to do. They told Axios that it would just be an initial fee for install, and then Unity had regrouped to discuss the issue and then confirmed that an extra fee would be charged if a user installs a game on a second device.
The other thing is this flies in the face of past statements that Unity has said. Previously in 2015, Unity CEO John Riccitiello, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, boasted that Unity would have no royalties, no around. And technically this new fee isn't a royalty, but it still flies in the face of what they were implying there. Another quote that they wrote previously was, when you obtain a version of Unity and don't upgrade your project, we think you should be able to stick to that version of the TOS. A lot of these kinds of quotes were quotes that Unity quietly removed from places that they'd uploaded them to previously, which really seems sleazy.
Yeah.
They've been very unclear about things. It seems like they've been trying to be sneaky about things, and they've been called on it at every turn. Everybody in the industry seems to be up in arms over this. It's like the one unifying factor, regardless of what platform you like, what type of game you like, whether you're a big or small developer, everybody has been calling them out on this and saying that this is a horrible move.
So Megacrit Games released a statement, and Megacrit Games is responsible for making Slay the Spire, which is a very popular game.
A really good game, too.
And a really good game. They said, the Megacrit team has been hard at work these past 2+ years on a new game, but unlike with Slay the Spire, the engine we have been developing it in is Unity. The retroactive pricing structure of runtime fees is not only harmful in a myriad of ways to developers, especially indies, it is a violation of trust. We believe Unity is fully aware of this, seeing as they have gone so far as to remove their TOS from GitHub. Despite the immense amount of time and effort our team has already poured into development on our new title, we will be migrating to a new engine unless the changes are completely reverted and TOS protections are put in place. We have never made a public statement before. That is how badly you f***ed up. Have fun censoring that.
So Innersloth, who made Among Us, commented on this. They basically also said, this is going to harm game studios of all budgets. Stop it, WTF. You have all kinds of developers chiming in, talking about what a horrible move this is. Massive Monster, who makes Cult of the Lamb, they made a joke saying that they're deleting their game on January 1st. Sad Owl Games, who makes Viewfinder, made a similar joke. Don't install our game after January 1st. Devolver Digital, a publisher, a pretty big publisher that publishes a lot of indie games, they put out a statement that sounded very ominous. They said, definitely include what engine you're using in game pitches. It's important information, which heavily implies that they would be less likely to publish games that were developed in Unity. And if that is the kind of attitude that they are saying publicly, picture every publisher in the industry taking a similar view of this.
Oh, and they have.
We are less likely to publish your game if you are using Unity to develop it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that Unity claimed would happen when the question came up, what about stuff like Microsoft Game Pass, where it's not a service we're in control of, and people install thousands of copies of this game that we do not directly make a profit off of. We made a deal with Microsoft so that they could use this game on Game Pass, and they're just installing however many users are using the game. And Unity came back with, oh, we'll just charge the platform holder for that. In this case, we'll charge Microsoft for that. It seems like the obvious way that Microsoft would respond to that is, no, you won't. We just won't have Unity games on our service. Because why would we pay an extra fee every time someone downloads one of these games? That doesn't make sense to us.
Yeah. So Unity ended up closing 2 offices and canceled an internal town hall because of credible death threats.
Here's the thing, though. It came out after that those were threats that came from an employee, which raises the question of, was this just someone who made like some offhand comment about their boss or the terrible idea this was? I have to wonder if maybe Unity was drumming this up to try and get some sympathy.
I have no idea.
But they messed up seriously. They have really trashed their reputation in the industry. And at this point, they've walked it back a bunch. They've said, oh, well, no, instead, we're just gonna, you'll get your choice of either being charged per install or just a 2.5% fee, based on profits after a certain dollar amount. And it's like, if they had come out the gate, if they had started by just saying, starting on this date, we're going to be charging a 2.5% fee after $200,000 or whatever, I feel like you'd hear some griping among developers, but it wouldn't have been this massive backlash. But the fact that this is what they've backtracked to, they've destroyed so much trust. I don't think that they're going to get that trust back unless they make a much bigger gesture. I'm talking about I have to wonder if maybe what they would need to do in order to win that trust back would be to get rid of management, because the management that made these decisions is still in place. And a lot of developers are looking at this being like, okay, they backtracked it to something that's a bit more reasonable now, but who's to say that they won't try the same stuff a year from now, 2 years from now? I can't go into development for a game that's going to take 2 years to develop without knowing whether that's going to be safe to do within the span of the next couple of years.
I do not blame any studio that does not want to go back to Unity because they're still not able to decide what they want to do.
So there are a couple of other issues here, which is Unity is kind of in a unique spot in the industry. It's not the only publicly available game engine. Like I said, there are others like the Unreal Engine, but the Unity engine and the Unreal Engine are not the same.
No, they're not. And in terms of, so I've tinkered with some game engine software before. Unreal Engine is pretty buff.
Yeah, it's a more high-end engine.
Oh, yeah. And
if you want to design more realistic graphics, you're probably going to be going for Unreal.
Unity is a lot easier to learn, and it gives you a lot more to make with what they give you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of Unity asset stores just selling you assets that you can use in your game. It's kind of led to its own unique problem, which is you'll have a lot of asset flips, which I've talked about on this podcast previously, where they will just take the asset and try to resell it as a game. And that is a problem, but that is also kind of showing one of the benefits of Unity, which is it's kind of easier, a lot easier to develop a game on Unity. That kind of skill at developing on Unity is not something you can directly transfer over to directly making a game on Unreal. I know a lot of gamers take the view of, well, why don't you just copy paste your game from Unity to Unreal? And
you can't really do that.
It's not that easy, number one. Like, you're talking about months of effort if you can do it, and not every game can do it, because you're talking about you're building on the foundation of that engine. And it's like, picture rebuilding a house on a different foundation. You can't just say, why can't you just get a forklift and move that house from the one foundation to the other foundation? Like, that's absolutely ridiculous, and anyone with any experience in building houses would tell you as much. It's the same for game code. You cannot just take a game from one code to another directly. You have all the assets from this game that you can use to rebuild the game in another engine. But that's just it, is you are rebuilding that game. You are building it again. That is no small feat. And especially if you are a smaller developer, that might be insurmountable. So you have a studio like Megacrit Games who makes Slay the Spire. And while they are an indie developer, they are pretty successful. And they are saying, we would take this game that we're in development on and moving it to a different engine. That is no small task that they are taking it upon to do. But because they are fairly successful, they have the capability to do that. A lot of smaller developers don't have that option. And they are just stuck feeling abandoned, like, do we have to stop developing our game because it might cost more money to pay Unity than we've actually been making from the sales of the game? You have stuff like charity games, where it's like, then you have to look at what Unity considers a charity. And apparently some things like Planned Parenthood, Unity doesn't consider Planned Parenthood a charity, which raises some other issues. It's a mess. And it's a mess that I'm not sure is going to get fixed anytime soon, unless Unity makes some major top-down changes, maybe changes in leadership, at the very least some sort of ironclad pledge not to change terms of service on games that have already started development or have already been released, because otherwise they've ruined their trust within the industry. And this is massive. Tons of games are created using Unity.
Well, I was going to suggest we move on to lighter, funner topics.
Yes.
So the Nintendo Direct, the more recent one, aired on September 14th.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a few gems that I am cautiously excited about.
I think that it seems like the general opinion on this Direct has been pretty unanimous. And that is, it was okay. It was good.
Yeah.
But there was nothing truly like jaw-dropping or game-changing here. It started with a look at the Splatoon 3 expansion pass wave 2, which they're calling Side Order. And this had been previously announced, but we actually got a more in-depth look at it here. And I think it looks good. I don't know that I have much to say about it.
After that, we have Mario vs. Donkey Kong, which is a remake.
So I had a few things to say about this one.
Really?
I played the original on the Game Boy Advance.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. It's not spectacular. It's good, but it's not one of their best games. And here's the thing. If they were going to do a remake of one of the games in the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series, I think it's generally agreed that the game that they should have focused on was the original Donkey Kong 94 on Game Boy, which is beloved. It might be the very best game on the Game Boy aside from Link's Awakening. It's truly great, and it's a bit perplexing that they skipped past that to do the next game, which is kind of just eh.
Maybe they're doing a bit more to it. I don't know.
Well, here's the other thing. If memory serves, looking it up on the eShop after the Direct, they're looking to sell it for $50.
Yikes.
It's a remake of a Game Boy Advance game. Now, granted, they are looking to sell the remake of Super Mario RPG for $60. But number one, Super Mario RPG is far more beloved than Mario vs. Donkey Kong was. And number two, it looks to be a far more extensive remake than Mario vs. Donkey Kong. So the fact that they're charging $50 for a remake of a $30 Game Boy Advance game, I'm so grossed out by that.
We have Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown. It's coming out next year, beginning of January.
Yeah, I think it looks good, but I don't know that I have much to say about it. I'll want to play it, but it's not like it's really excited me.
Yeah. Horizon Chase 2 was shadow dropped during the Direct.
I feel like I really liked the first Horizon Chase, and I might have felt tempted to pull the trigger and buy this game after the Direct, except the footage that we saw in the Direct was not great. There was a lot of slowdown there. I think I either want to wait until I see some reviews or a discount on this because that looks really rough.
Super Crazy Rhythm Castle drops later this year on November 14th.
This is a music rhythm game with a bunch of Konami music in it, and there's been some really good Konami music over the years, so I'm curious about this. I don't recall, but I think the price was a bit high on this, so again, this is one I might want to wait for it to go on sale.
Spy X Anya Operation Memories comes out sometime in 2024. Looks cute.
I think this is based on an anime or something.
It is.
I've heard people talking about, oh, they're making a game based on that. And I'm like, they're making a game based on what? Kind of shows how out of touch I am, I guess.
It's a cute anime. I've seen bits and pieces of it.
But I guess for people who follow that anime, this will be something to look forward to.
Like you said, Super Mario RPG.
This one was previously announced. They just showed off more of it. And I don't think I needed to see more of it. I'm already like, yeah, it looks pretty good. It's coming up in November.
Another Code Recollection.
This was a big surprise.
I have no idea what this one is.
Back on the original Nintendo DS, they released a game called Trace Memory, which is a graphic adventure that used the touchscreen for a lot of its puzzles. And they released a sequel on the Wii that never came to the US. And this release, Another Code Recollection, is a remake of both of those games. So it's going to be our first time getting the second game in the series, and both of the games look really gorgeous. I really love the character designs in this game. I never played the original when it came out on DS, but I'm really curious to try out this remake. It looks great.
Princess Peach Showtime, which I am cautiously excited about.
We had this game teased at a previous Nintendo Direct, but we didn't even get the title. So this is the first time we are getting both the title and the release date. It's coming out in March. And it also showed off how Peach is changing outfits.
It's adorable.
I'm still not entirely sure I know quite how this will play. It kind of seems like it's going to be a game that has multiple different types of gameplay contained within it. Like there's a detective outfit where you're going around looking for clues.
I feel like it's going to be kind of like a Mario Party game. I feel like that's probably what it's going to be like.
That's not really the vibe I was getting from it.
What were you getting from it?
I'm feeling like it looks like a single player game to me, first of all. Second of all, it looks like a game where, from what we saw in the trailer, my guess is it's going to be like separated into chapters, and each chapter will play differently. Like you're going into this area and suddenly you'll be sword fighting, and you're going into this area and suddenly you will be doing timing based kung fu challenges. And then you're in this area and you're having to do timing based decorate the cake challenges and stuff. I feel like it's going to make for a good amount of variety. I'm not sure how well it'll work as far as depth goes, but it certainly is interesting, and it's nice to see Princess Peach get her own game.
Yes, I agree.
Because the only other game that I think she's starred in was Super Princess Peach on the Nintendo DS, which was a very good platformer, but also really iffy in terms of its theming. The premise was, it was a platformer, like a Mario-style platformer, where Princess Peach was jumping around and trying to save Mario and that kind of stuff. And on the bottom screen, you could use the touch screen to switch between 4 different states based on emotion. You had an angry emotion where she could set things on fire, a sad emotion where she could, use her tears to put out fires, and a few other things. And it's hard not to look at that and be like, so they finally had Princess Peach starring in her own game, and it's basically the PMS platformer. That's not a great look. Again, really fun game, but I'm not sure if they really thought that through.
Okay.
This is a bit different. Princess Peach's thing in this game is it's stage plays and she's dressing up and each of her outfits gives her different abilities. That's kind of cool. I'll be interested to see how this works.
Saga Emerald Beyond 2024. I don't really remember much about it.
I've never been a big fan of the Saga series, and I doubt this is going to change my mind, but hey, for those who like the series, you got another one coming up. At least graphically, it looks great.
Tomb Raider 1 through 3 gets remastered. Also kind of meh for me, but I've never been a huge fan of that series.
So I will probably shock people, maybe even you, by saying I have never played a Tomb Raider game.
I don't believe you.
I've never played any games, not any of the originals, not any of the reimaginings, not any of like the new Shadow of the Tomb Raider, never any of them. I know that they are massively influential in the industry, and this one looks like it's going to be very faithful to the original versions of the first trilogy, and they will have both the original graphics and remastered graphics, which don't look very remastered, but I suppose it's better than the originals were at least.
It was, but it's not very much.
Yeah, so hey, it'll be great to finally have Tomb Raider games on a Nintendo platform. And prior to this, I think the only Tomb Raider games that have been on any Nintendo platform were, like, I think we got the Tomb Raider and the Something of Light on Nintendo Switch earlier this year, I want to say. Kind of one of the spin-off games, but that's not as big a deal as the actual mainline Tomb Raider series. So this is something.
Detective Pikachu returns October 6th, 2023, which is soon.
Really? All of the footage I see of this game, I could not be less interested.
I mean, it looks cute. I doubt I will buy it unless I will buy it if the footage that I see is good and the gameplay. But it looks cute.
Okay. Hey, for people who like it, great. Yeah.
Battle Crush Spring 2024.
Hey, you skipped over Trombone Champ.
We already talked about it.
Okay, fine. So, Battle Crush, I think this was a free-to-play game. I couldn't tell you anything else about it. It didn't impress itself upon me very much.
War Tales was also shadow dropped.
I hear this is a very good turn-based strategy game. I've not played it myself. I've also heard that the Nintendo Switch version has a lot of problems that they are aiming to fix in a patch. I can't say much more than that. I haven't played it, so I don't know.
Contra Operation Galuga.
This is supposed to be like a reimagining of the first game with 4-player support, and graphically it doesn't look great, but it looks like it still could be a return to form for the series, and it's being developed by WayForward, who does good work, so I have some good hopes for this. Yeah.
I loved the artwork in Unicorn Overlord.
This game looks like it is a spiritual successor to the Ogre Battle series, which I want to say this game is being developed by Atlas, and the Ogre Battle franchise is owned by Square Enix. So I feel like they would have called this Ogre Battle if they had the rights to that name. I never much cared for the Ogre Battle series. The gameplay just never really clicked with me. But hey, I hope it works out for them. I hope that fans of the Ogre Battle games finally have a new game in that series to look forward to, even if it's not called Ogre Battle.
Luigi's Mansion 2 HD.
This is something we already knew was coming. Mm-hmm. We just got a official title, which I guess they decided not to call it Dark Moon. They're just going to call it Luigi's Mansion 2. And now it has a release window for summer 2024, which I think we all could have assumed anyway. Fine, good, whatever.
For those of you who have generous wallets, we have a few amiibos coming out this holiday season. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom includes amiibos of Zelda and Ganondorf. I want both of them, but my wallet is crying.
I know you really want that Zelda one.
I really want the Zelda one. I could probably do without the Ganondorf one.
The Zelda amiibo is really nice, and it touches on one of the most important emblematic moments of the entire game.
Yeah. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 have amiibos for Noah and Mio coming out next year in January. Super Smash Brothers has an amiibo of Sora, which is
the final Super Smash Brothers amiibo. You're talking about a game with, I think it has, I want to say close to 90 characters. Every character will now have an amiibo.
Oh, that's great. Bandle Tale, a League of Legends story.
Once again, you skipped over a game, F-099.
Didn't we just talk about it?
Yes, we talked about it earlier, but it was still a part of this.
Yeah, okay, fine. But we have Bandle Tale, a League of Legends story, and then we have Song of Nunu, a League of Legends story.
I think both of these games look cute in their own way. I'm not a big League of Legends guy. I've never played League of Legends, but they have a bunch of spin-off games focusing on one or two characters, and a lot of those have been really good.
Yeah, their storytelling is pretty spot on, I will say.
So,
I'm just not a huge fan of MOBAs.
well, neither of these is going to be a MOBA.
No, but, I never initially got into League of Legends because I don't play MOBAs. Not really.
I don't think you need to, though. Like, right now on Netflix, you can watch the Arcane series.
Which is great.
Oh, it's amazing. So it's like, even if you never played League of Legends, have zero interest in it, it's still a franchise that has a lot of room to go into it and be like, well, I'm not interested in League of Legends, but this League of Legends game over here, this spin-off or whatever, looks great. Like, The Ruined King was a truly great RPG. And in particular, I thought Bandle Tale looks really cute. It has this kind of retro, I think it was like a pixel art kind of graphical style that looks very cute. Looking forward to it.
WarioWare Move It, which I'm very curious about.
This one, they had announced previously, they were just showing off more footage of it here. I think it looks really good. This looks like it is kind of the direct successor to the Wii game in the series, which was WarioWare Smooth Moves, which was arguably the best game in the series. It was really good. So the fact that they are making a direct successor to that game really gives me something to look forward to. I really liked the other WarioWare game that was released on the Switch, but it was also one where, truth be told, once I finished it, I'm like, that was good. I enjoyed it. I don't really feel a need to keep playing it. And hey, looking forward to this one. Hopefully it'll have longer legs.
Ayuden Chronicles 100 Heroes.
This game is being made as a spiritual successor to a classic game series called Suikoden, which Konami is doing a collection that's going to come out next year. It got delayed. I never got into Suikoden, but I guess this looks good. I'm curious what it'll end out like. So, yeah.
Eastward Octopia.
This one, it looks like they're doing like a farming game based in Eastward, but they're not going to make you play through the main game. You can access the DLC from the main menu. And I guess if you like farming games, this will be good. The Eastward games have a really beautiful presentation, so this is not a bad move for them, I think.
Wargroove 2, later this October.
This might be a bit spoilery as far as reviews that are coming up, but I've already bought my reserve of this one. I mean, the first Wargroove was my game of the year for the game that came out. So it's for the year it came out, rather. So it's like, yeah, I kind of have to play the sequel. It'll be interesting now that we actually have Advance Wars on the Nintendo Switch. Wargroove, when it first came out, was like, well, we don't have Advance Wars, but this is a lot like Advance Wars. So this is Advance Wars for those who don't have it. Now we have it, but the thing is, and this is also kind of spoilery for reviews coming up, I also got Advance Wars, and that review is coming up too. I will say Wargroove still fares fairly well compared to Advance Wars, and it makes me really wonder, is Wargroove 2 going to be the best game of this style, these turn-based strategies? Really, really good games. I'm super looking forward to this.
Dave the Diver, also coming out in October.
I've heard really good things about this game. Like, people are talking about this being indie game of the year material. Like, Sea of Stars is also kind of being talked about in that same breath, but Dave the Diver, half of the game is you're going in these actiony sequences and you're shooting up fish in the ocean, and the other half is you're in kind of like these arcadey sequences where you're chopping up the fish and serving them as sushi. I hear it's really, really good, so I'm really curious to play this one.
Mario Kart 8 Booster Pass Final Wave, which showed off Diddy Kong, Funky Kong, Pauline, and Peachette. I didn't even know that's a character. As well as Daisy Circuit from Mario Kart Wii.
The funny thing about Peachette, there was this game, Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, that was a re-release of a Wii U game on Nintendo Switch. When they made that game, they released a power-up that could be used by the character of Toadette. It is a crown or something like that, where if she grabs it, she turns into a Toadette version of Peach called Peachette. The thing is, when people found out about this, they went nuts with fan art with the question of, what if other characters got this power up? So you had them making a Booette, which was, what if one of the Boo ghosts got this power up? Of course, the big one, the one that everyone remembers, is Bowsette. What if Bowser got a version of this power up? And now I think Bowsette is more well known than Peachette ever was, despite the fact that Peachette is an official Nintendo character and Bowsette is just a fan what if character. But everyone loves the idea of Bowser turning into this kind of hot BDSM version of Peach. God. So when this announcement of this character coming to Mario Kart was made, I heard a lot of people going, what? Why aren't they doing Bowsette? And I'm just kind of doing a facepalm being like, Bowsette was never an actual Nintendo character. It was always this fan kind of Rule 34 character that people made just because they were like, hey, hot Bowser.
Okay.
Anyway, in regards to this booster pass, honestly, I'm not too interested in the characters. I don't really feel like this changes things up much. I'm more interested in what tracks that they're going to add. And they've only revealed one. They've only revealed Daisy Circuit, which has to be one of the more boring tracks that they could add. I'm thinking of all the great tracks from throughout the Mario Kart series that I would love to see in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe that they have not yet added. Like in, I think, Mario Kart 7 on the DS, they had one where you were racing on Bowser's airships, and that one was great. They had another one that was like a bazaar run by Shy Guys that was really cool and had some really nice atmosphere to it. So there are all kinds of really good courses they could still potentially do that they haven't yet. And so seeing Daisy Circuit, it's like, really? You led with Daisy Circuit? That's so meh. I mean, I'll be glad to have it because it'll always be great to have more tracks in the game, but you couldn't have led with a more boring course than this.
Among Us is coming out with a new map called the Fungal, which is coming in October.
I really loved Among Us when it came out, but it is so hard to get together a good group of friends to play this game. And I feel like the time when this game has been culturally relevant has kind of passed by this point.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
I hope it gives me a new excuse to play this game again, but I get the feeling, at least knowing our current group, I kind of suspect that it's probably not going to happen.
And then last, we have Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door.
This is a remake of a GameCube game, and it is widely considered to be the best game in the Paper Mario series. And I actually did not expect them to do this, in particular because they're already doing a remake of Super Mario RPG. Why would they do another remake of another Mario RPG in such close proximity? It doesn't make much sense. But that's fine because it's a great game and I'd love to get a hold of it on a modern platform, and it looks so good. It's kind of a bit of an unusual game to end the direct on because it's not, like I said, it's not a mega hit game. It's not a game that's going to sell a gazillion copies, but it'll still be great for people to actually be able to play, again, what is arguably the best Mario RPG ever made. There's argument to be made there. Super Mario RPG was good. A lot of the Mario and Luigi games were good, but this one is definitely the best Paper Mario game. So before we end things, I feel like it's important for us to discuss what this Nintendo Direct represents as a whole.
I feel like it just represents a lot of remakes.
You're definitely right. Yeah. There's a lot of remakes here. And I feel like that is a part of a bigger trend that we see in this Nintendo Direct. There's a lot of games in this Direct that are pretty safe bets. You know, all the remakes of classic games, all the ports of games that were successes on other platforms. And I feel like the one message that is resonating strongly from this Nintendo Direct is we are maybe in the final stretch of the Nintendo Switch's lifespan. And while we still have good stuff coming up, it's all stuff that won't be terribly difficult to create. It won't be risky. It'll be fairly safe and predictable. And probably that is because we have all of our teams working on other major projects for our next big hardware, which still has not yet been announced, but a lot of people are speculating we may very well see an announcement for this coming up in maybe February, March, April, sometime in that period, probably before their big yearly investor call that they have. I want to say it's in April, but it might be in March. I can't recall. It seems like, while certainly the stuff that we have coming up for the next year or so looks good, it definitely looks like they're winding down. They're not planning any huge releases. And there was one game that people were kind of wondering if it would show up in this direct that we did not see, which tells a huge story in and of itself. And that is Metroid Prime 4. This game was announced shortly after, like, I think within the first year or two of the Nintendo Switch coming out. And then we heard a few years later that it was being restarted again from scratch because their progress on it had not been good. And the fact that we still have not seen a single, not even a single screenshot of this game really strongly insists that this is a game that's probably going to be a launch title for the next Nintendo platform.
Maybe. All right, that wraps things up for this month's eShopperReviews podcast. Again, we want to thank all of our patrons on Patreon for contributing. Patreon donors are the first ones to gain access to these podcasts. And if you're interested in becoming a donor, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/eShopperReviews. And once again, if you're curious to read any of the reviews or content mentioned in this podcast, you can find these all posted free for all to access at no cost on our Patreon page. Once again, this has been Jen Ip
and Jake McNeil.
We'll see you next month. In the meantime, we both hope you found this content helpful and enjoyed some good games. Catch you all next time.
Later.